conversations between 2018 and 2022.
Why is the human brain divided into two hemispheres? Is it to experience our experience in duality? I understand that people with the unified brain also experience duality, but is it for some metaphysical reason? Thank you.
It is the result of the thinking of beings with a serious predisposition to think in duality. First is the thought, then the physical manifestation. Their predisposition in incarnation after incarnation to think in dualistic terms is generically embodied as a dualistic split brain. It is still a decision from the astral to incarnate this way, but it is a result of the attachments to the ideas you hold and still hold in the astral. You cannot think like many ETs simply because you do not have the hardware. However, you could develop it if you wanted to. The fact that you have split brains is not a real impediment. It is your mentality, your ideas, and those are the ones that cause that split brain. Because the physical DNA that dictates the formation of that split brain was manifested as a mirror of your ideas and attachments to those ideas.
What about people who were in a coma for a long time, years, or a short time? Are they aware of the state that they are in?
They can forget that they have a body. They are in source, on other planes, doing whatever they wish. Only if there is a reason to return to their body point of attention, they will. If not, they simply forget. And from the point of view of their relatives, they are simply gone. Although it depends on the causes for being in a coma, because many times there is a damage in the body that does not allow linking with the signal of source.
Do you know what causes spontaneous combustion?
As with practically all paranormal events, it is something happening from the other side, and it filters down to the side of the living or the so-called material side. However, yes, there are indications that it can often be due to causes more explainable even to science, such as a normal death for another reason, and then a fire on the corpse as caused by a cigarette. Human fat would function as candle wax, and it would burn at a high temperature. While this is logical in some cases, most of them being explainable, it does not explain other more bizarre cases where even bones have been burned to dust, since they would need extremely high temperatures that would not be possible only by burning body fat. Another point here is that these events, as would be other paranormal ones with strong interference on the physical world, as far as I know, there is clear interference of either entities from the astral side or from the world of the dead, or interference of technologies of non-human races who, for their own reasons, conduct experiments on some human beings. This is the case of at least some cases of lithotellurgy, where stones rain down even inside the affected property. I know of at least 2 cases, one in Madrid and another in Chile, where the reason is clear interference of non-humans from a ship using tractor beam technology, doing experiments on humans below, throwing stones at them in unbelievable ways to document their reactions. There are some cases of spontaneous combustion that, from my perspective, are explained as assassinations using plasma from some device. But I have no details of who or why they have done it. Only that it is viewed here as murder done from a ship using energy weapons.
Wow, so it could be produced by something external to the calcination in this case, by astral beings or with non-terrestrial technology. But what could be the purpose of this besides ending the life of the individual? And I imagine that this is done by regressive non-Federation races.
They will have their reasons, if only for the release of energy from the body itself, of the suffering of how it died burning from within. The spirit world, or the lower astral as they call it, is as real as the so-called material world.
Question from a follower. Can astral travel change your body temperature? Example, 32 degrees.
That is more for Yasky. But I will tell you that I see it natural that your body temperature does drop. I can't explain more than that it's like a normal physiological reaction to that kind of stimulus or lack of stimulus, based also on the fact that when going into deep sleep, when falling asleep, a person also loses body temperature, which explains why it's hard to sleep when it's too hot.
Question from a follower. The incorrupt bodies of the saints are another Vatican hoax.
It requires more research, but surely it's either fake or it's thanks to age-old embalming techniques based on Egyptian technology stolen by the Vatican, not because they're saints.
There are no incorrupt bodies then?
Yes, they are, after being embalmed, if they don't decompose or they're very below zero, like in a glacier or in a bottle of formol. Only that way.
Someone asks, the uncorrupted bodies, is that because of the excessive monatomic gold they took?
Not because of that specifically, although I've heard of that, but because of the complex embalming process. You don't need monoatomic gold for that embalming process. Monoatomic gold is useful for living organisms, not dead ones.
And can bodily organs be replicated? I guess not. Replicating organs, no, it is living tissue. It doesn't work. In order to do that, you have to grow them in a metapod. It is possible. But it is not that they are grown and transplanted. They are grown inside the body of the person as a whole. Meat is grown, just the muscles, and it is food for Urma or Alpha Draco, carnivorous species. Still, there is ethical debate, and some prefer to eat other synthetic things. Me and Robert both feel quite grossness about what's inside the biological body. I mean, I truly don't understand why we couldn't design the bodies in a less messy way, like stuffed animals or something. Why such a complicated biological gross system inside? Where did that come from? In source, all is possible, so why not create us physical bodies like stuffed animals, just with some fluff or something? Many species are a lot simpler, like many greys that are essentially walking plants, vegetables biologically. Really? So why are we so yucky inside? No, I mean it, they are. And some so-called reptilian races are mammals. They only look like reptilians, such as Yautijas, Kingu and Usungal. They are not true reptiles as the Draco are. That complexity is probably the result of a very complicated energetic being, reflecting all itself below. Another point is that a human or Lyrian body is not one being, but a colony. The real units are the cells, not the whole. Each one of them holds consciousness in itself as a person, and adding them all up, you have a whole body where you, as the one from above wearing it, becomes like the government to them, God, sort of.
Does the body die at different rates? That is to say that for the Adma to leave the body completely, all the cells would have to be dead, right? Or is it not necessary for all of them to be dead?
Again, leaning on Bruce Lipton. A human body is not a unit. It is a sum of its parts, which are the cells that are the real basic units that compose a human. So, the body is a community, a conglomerate that even cooperates with other beneficial and necessary microorganisms. End of Bruce Lipton's support. When a person dies, cell death in terms of internal organs will proceed differently for each place in the body. So, even if a person has been dead for a few hours, there will be communities of cells that are still struggling to stay alive. In fact, this response of cellular self-protection when a person dies is the same response of trying to achieve immortality that cells present, in many cases the same cells, in a cancerous process. It must be remembered that cancer is largely caused or characterized by a problem of oxygen supply, coupled with an acidification of the body that causes a low voltaic around the cellular communities. So, as each cell contains the DNA of the individual itself, it is the individual itself in a tiny form. Therefore, its DNA will have the soul signal, which can be said to be like an antenna in its double helix. So, there will be a soul signal as long as there are living cells. The time of cell necropsy differs for each person, but it appears that it takes longer for cells to die statistically at sea level due to a high oxygen content, although the difference is small. In terms of being able to understand when total cell necrosis has occurred, it can be said that when the rigor mortis stage is present, this is mostly complete, although there will still be living cells in a cancerous state attempting immortality, as I have described above. The time varies, but it would take from 24 to 48 hours to complete the process completely, varying from individual to individual. Even so, and even if the signal is little, the soul or point of attention consciousness will have already left the body since clinical death occurs.
What about autopsies that would be less than 48 hours, for example? Does the disembodied person suffer?
They find many cells in the process of necropsy that are not yet completely dead. Some organs die before others. In fact, as I said above, the main soul signal, consciousness attention, left the body during clinical death. The signal remaining in the cells, although present, is little. As for the suffering, it is little but possible. But yes, there can be some, but it will depend on each person when discarnating, because if he has attachments and obsession to his body, He will be very disturbed during the process of the autopsy. But if he is gone, it is of little importance. Point aside, cremating a body before the total necrotic process does confer the emanation of vital energy lush suffering that is food for archons. Cells still alive will emanate lush, not as much as a living person being burned, but enough to be useful to archons, animals and vermin creatures of the lower 4D astral. Is it better to cremate the body or bury it? It is better to bury, just wrapped in a sheet and at a good depth in nature. But for humans, that is not possible. And burying with a coffin is expensive and even grotesque. For human costs, it is often better and much more practical, faster and cheaper to cremate. It depends on each person and their possibilities. Why not cremate? Because they scatter the dead all over the city. Even if they have filters, it is so. And because they waste fuel and feed low entities. What filters? The crematoriums have filters so that the ash of the dead does not escape. But the micro ash does escape. It has been reported to me that when you pass through a crematorium, it smells like burnt fat. That smell is molecules from the dead entering the nose. It is the truth. The combustion is not perfect. You don't burn all the dead. You have to put the bones through a shredder. The bones are not destroyed by burning. You need a mechanical shredder. You know, I have heard Ashayana Dean, a lady who also talks to some ETs, say that it is better to cremate because that way you eliminate all the link with your biological body. That when you bury, you still have some kind of link. She may be right too. Very good point. But all the ties are just ideas. But I agree with her. More so for humans who don't quite understand what happens when they die. In Taygeta, it's different because everything is clear. So no attachments are left to the body, even if it still exists in a state of putrefaction. It depends on how each person, consciousness, handles his own death from the other side. Putrefaction, in fact, is only a state of decomposition where something material lacks creative attention and returns to being only potential energy.